and play on 2nd and 10. That's his youth right there.
Tagovailoa trying to make up for it. Fires to the end zone. Touchdown! Alabama wins!
Today I'll be continuing with my college football game-by-game prediction and roster discussion videos. Today I'll be doing the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets. So at Georgia Tech head coach Brent Key had his best recruiting class so far at Georgia Tech. This is his third full season as Georgia Tech's head coach, and this year they had the 24th ranked recruiting class in the country. They didn't have any 5-star players, but they had 6 4-star players, and he's really turned the program around quickly. So offensively, they only averaged 26.5 points per game last year, but that was because their quarterback Haynes King had to miss 2 games completely because of an injury, and he was limited in 3 other games because of that same injury. And Haynes King comes back for what'll be his third season as their starting quarterback. So he started at 24 games at Georgia Tech, and last season he had 2,114 yards passing and completed a really good 72.9% of his passes, and he threw 14 touchdown passes and only 2 interceptions, and averaged a good 7.9 yards per throw, and he's a really good runner. He also had 587 rushing yards and 11 rushing touchdowns on 125 carries, averaging 4.7 yards per carry. So I've made it pretty clear who I think the top 4 quarterbacks in the ACC are this year, but I think Haynes King is the 5th best quarterback in the ACC. He's a good college quarterback, but I don't think that he'll play ever in the NFL. But at wide receiver, they do lose Eric Singleton, who was really good. He transferred, but this is still going to be a good wide receiver room. They've got Malik Rutherford coming back, a 2-year starter for them. Last year he had 62 catches for 702 and 3 touchdowns, averaging 11.3 a catch. And they brought in 2 good transfer wide receivers from FIU. Eric Rivers, who had in 12 games last year 62 catches for 1,172 yards and 12 touchdowns, averaging a very impressive 18.9 a catch. And they brought in Dion Patterson, who had in 12 games 50 catches for 685 and 7 touchdowns, averaging 13.7 a catch. And at running back, they averaged 187 rushing yards per game last year, which it ranked 32nd in the country. I think they'll be at least that good this year. They've got Jamal Haynes coming back, who is one of the best running backs in the country. He has been for the last 2 years. But last season he had 944 yards and 9 touchdowns on 169 carries, averaging 5.6 a carry. Here's a clip of a game-winning touchdown run by him.
Clock down to 27 seconds, and they're going to run it, and it's explosion right down the middle of the field. You just said it, Max Brown. Can you believe that?
And on the offensive line, they do only have 2 starters coming back, but one of them is Kalen Rutledge at right guard, who was an All-American last year. He's a top 10 offensive lineman in the country for sure. And their head coach, Brent Key, his best position is offensive line. He was the offensive line coach at Georgia Tech before he became the head coach. So I would expect them to still have a good offensive line. And now on the defensive side, they were pretty good here last year. They gave up on average 22.2 points per game, which was so much better than they were the year before. So they ranked 30th at stopping the run, only giving up 122.2 rushing yards per game. But their defensive line does only have one starter coming back. They'll be starting three transfers who weren't great players where they came from. So the starter they've got coming back is a good player, though, at stopping the run. He's not much of a pass rusher, though. Jordan Vandenberg, he had last year 23 tackles and a sack and two fumble recoveries. And then at linebacker, they've got their best one coming back and leading tackler from last season, Kyle Efford, a 2-year starter for them at linebacker. He only played in 10 games last year because of an injury, but he had in that 64 tackles and 3 sacks and a pass breakup. And the secondary did have some struggles last year. They ranked at only 69th at stopping the pass, giving up 220.7 passing yards per game. But I think their secondary is going to be better this year. So they return starting safeties, Clayton Powell Lee and Omar Daniels. So Powell Lee had last year 53 tackles and 3 pass breakups and a sack. And Daniels had in 12 games, he missed 1 game with an injury, 49 tackles and 3 pass breakups. Here's a clip of an impressive play by him.
Play action, tight end screen, Arroyo going no.
And then at cornerback, they return Amari Harvey, who had last year 63 tackles and 2 pass breakups and an interception and a forced fumble. And they bring in a good cornerback from Georgia State. His name is J.Y. Gilmore. He had in 12 games last season 53 tackles and 2 interceptions and a pass breakup. So I think they'll be solid on the defensive and offensive sides of the ball this year. So now for the game-by-game predictions, starting with on the road at Colorado. So you know how teams get 40 seconds to snap the ball in between plays, and some teams like to snap it as soon as they can get lined up. But Georgia Tech is the opposite of that. They like to let the play clock run down to 5 seconds or less before snapping it. And I don't think that's going to go well for Colorado. But Georgia Tech loves those possessions of 5 and 6 minutes or even longer. And Colorado's defensive line is not going to be very good. And Georgia Tech is going to lean on their offensive line in this game, I think, like they like to do. And I think they'll wear out Colorado with their run game. And Georgia Tech's defense, I think, will play really well in this game because I don't think they'll have to be on the field for very long. So I think Georgia Tech wins this game fairly easily. So now Gardner Webb, this will be a name your score game for Georgia Tech. they'll be able to put in their backups at halftime. And now Clemson. So Clemson's wide receiver room is even better than Georgia Tech's is. I think they're going to be an even better passing team than Georgia Tech is going to be. And Clemson doesn't have a star running back like Georgia Tech does with Jamal Haynes, but they've got an even better offensive line than Georgia Tech does, I think. And Clemson's front seven is going to be good enough to, I think, slow down the Georgia Tech run game and force them to have to throw the football more. And Clemson's secondary, I think, is going to be good enough to challenge those Georgia Tech wide receivers. I think Clemson gets this win in what'll probably be a pretty close game. And now Temple, this should be a big blowout win for Georgia Tech. They should have a comfortable enough lead at halftime to put in their second string. And now on the road at Wake Forest, probably won't be a blowout win for Georgia Tech, but Wake Forest I still think is going to be one of the worst Power Four teams in the country. I think Georgia Tech will win this one by around two touchdowns. And now Virginia Tech. So Georgia Tech lost this game 21-6 last year, but this was one of those games where Haynes King was out completely. So that obviously hurt Georgia Tech passing and running in that game. And I think if he'd have played, there's a good chance Georgia Tech would have won that game. And that was on the road. This year it's at home for Georgia Tech. And Virginia Tech, I think, is going to be even worse than they were last year. I think they're going to have a hard time making it to a bowl game. I think it'll probably be pretty close, but I'm going with Georgia Tech. And now on the road at Duke. So, like Georgia Tech, Duke is a team that I don't really see as being a contender to win the ACC this year, but I'd say they're right behind the contenders to win the conference. And Duke, I think, probably has the second best defense in the ACC this year behind Clemson. Their defense, I think, can slow down the Georgia Tech run game some. And Duke's offense, I don't think will be good, but I think it'll be a little bit better than it was last year. Now, I do think Georgia Tech's defense will keep Duke from scoring a lot in this game. I think it'll be a low scoring, close game, but with it being on the road, I have a feeling that Duke is going to get this win. And now Syracuse, a team that I don't see being able to stop Georgia Tech's run game or their passing game. Georgia Tech, I think, is going to be a much better running and passing team than Syracuse, and I think they're better at the line of scrimmage on both sides. I think Georgia Tech wins this one by at least two scores. And now on the road at NC State, this is a very losable game for Georgia Tech. The coach at NC State seems to always get less out of a good-looking roster like he did last season. They had a pretty good-looking roster on paper, and they were terrible. But he also seems to get more out of a bad-looking roster, which is how their roster looks this year. Looking at NC State's roster, it doesn't look very good offensively or defensively. There's not really any positions on it where I'm like, I think that's going to be a strength for them. And Georgia Tech's roster, I see several spots that I think are going to be strengths for them. And I think this will be a close game, but NC State is not usually very good at the line of scrimmage. And with Georgia Tech being a physical team, I think Georgia Tech gets this win. And now on the road at Boston College. So even though this is the second of two road games in a row, Georgia Tech gets a bye in between these two road games. And Boston College is just not a very tough place to play, and their roster is just not very good. Offensively, they've not got a quarterback near as good as Haynes King. They've not got a running back near as good as Jamal Haynes. And their wide receiver room, they do have one good wide receiver, but they don't have a good group of wide receivers like Georgia Tech has got. And then defensively, their front seven, I don't see being able to slow down the Georgia Tech run game at all. I do think this will be pretty close, but I've got to go with Georgia Tech. And now Pittsburgh, a team that if you don't like them, you probably don't ever really think about them. But because the ACC is so bad, I think Pittsburgh will probably finish around the middle of the conference this year. But if they were in the SEC, they'd finish near the bottom. But Pittsburgh offensively has a running back almost as good as Jamal Haynes at Georgia Tech, Desmond Reed, who had nearly 1,000 rushing yards last season, and their quarterback Eli Holstein only played 9 full games last year, but he had in that over 2,500 yards. So total offense, and their offensive line is not talented, but it's experienced. I think they can score some points in this game. And defensively, their front seven, I think, will be good enough to slow down Georgia Tech's run game a little bit and force them to have to throw the football some more than they like to. But I don't think Pittsburgh's secondary is going to be any match for those Georgia Tech wide receivers. So I do think that Georgia Tech wins this game in a close one. And now Georgia on a Friday in the rivalry game. So this game will be played in Atlanta, Georgia, where Georgia Tech is at. But Georgia Tech has chosen not to play the game at their home stadium, and that's different from how this has always been done because before these two teams always played at each other's home stadiums, and I think it's a big mistake by Georgia Tech because that's only going to help Georgia. And they took Georgia to 8 overtimes last year at Georgia's home stadium. So you'd think they would have wanted their home stadium because even though there's still a big talent difference between Georgia and Georgia Tech, it's not as big as it was a few years ago. And it's not like it was a few years ago where Georgia Tech just came on the field to take their loss to Georgia. Georgia Tech now believes that they can beat Georgia, and I think they have a chance to beat Georgia. But Georgia has owned Georgia Tech, and I know it does seem kind of wrong not to pick Georgia Tech to get a big win, but their only two chances for a big win this year would be Clemson and Georgia, and Clemson has owned them too. And I do think, though, that Georgia Tech will be competitive in this game, and it'll probably be a close game, but I have to go with Georgia. But I had considered actually picking Georgia Tech when I made the Georgia video months ago. So hopefully, though, if you're a Georgia Tech fan, you're not mad that I picked them to lose to Georgia. Because even though I have them at 9-3 overall and 6-2 in the conference, that wouldn't put them in the ACC championship or the college football playoff. But this would still be a very good season for Georgia Tech, their best in a long time, and I do think they're going to be a good team. So that will be it with this video. Please subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll be back soon.